Hello and welcome to the 905er podcast. My name is Roland Tanner.
I am Joel McLeod.
This week we're continuing our series of interviews with candidates in 905 municipal races that we think deserve attention. We can't speak to every candidate, but we can highlight races that we think you should know about, where there are contests with credible candidates who offer real alternatives. Today's guest could hardly illustrate that point better. Zeeshan Hamid is running in Milton against incumbent Mayor Krantz. In the interview that follows, we don't talk about Krantz very much, and that's as it should be. Candidates should talk about what they offer. But for anybody unfamiliar with Milton, or even those that are, it bears repeating just how extraordinary Krantz is. But not because he's been around a long time. No, that's not the reason. Gord is a little bit unusual. When Krantz was first elected to Milton Council in 1965, he did so with only 837 votes. In fact, he did really pretty badly at that first election, and every election for the next decade. In 1965, he came fifth out of a total of 7 candidates. But back in those days, the top 6 candidates were all elected, which meant only one candidate went home without getting a job. And the young gun Gordon made it onto council with the lackluster endorsement of 13% of voters. For a full 10 years, he never managed to get the support of more than 16% of Milton voters, but was elected anyway. By 1980, his numbers had finally begun to improve, and he became mayor in a close race, edging out his rival by only 500 votes. But since then, he's rarely faced a serious challenge. Election after election, Krantz was acclaimed as mayor in elections, as mayors across the 905 were acclaimed in those days. When he faced any opponents, he generally won with landslide victories, albeit still of small numbers in a relatively small town, say 7,000 votes to 700, as he did in 1995. His stiffest challenge came in 1997 when Colin Best, who today still serves as Ward 1 councillor, came within 1,000 votes of beating him. But the comparison with Best is illuminating. Colin Best has been involved in Milton politics since 1980. By any standards other than Krantz's, that's a very long career. But Councillor Best has an email address and a website, and Councillor Best is a regular Twitter contributor and has a Facebook page. Councillor Best, in other words, has kept up with the times and is as accessible as a modern councillor is expected to be. Not so Krantz. Mayor Krantz has no email address, no website. In fact, no online presence whatsoever. If we want to invite Mayor Krantz to provide reasons why voters should choose him for re-election, we'd have to track him down by his phone number to invite him. Now, that's not rocket science, perhaps. And if we did track down his phone number, we'd then have to go out and buy him a computer and set him up with a Zoom account. And that's a bit more tricky. And that, in 2022, certainly is extraordinary. Krantz's challenger this year is Zeeshan Hamid. Z has a mathematics and computer science degree from Waterloo and became a Milton Town Councillor in 2010. In 2018, he was elected to be a regional councillor for Milton, and because a Milton councillor is still not paid anything like a salary of a full-time professional, Z has also continued to work in the tech and engineering sector and has worked in the past for Microsoft and Amazon. I therefore feel confident in assuming Z Hamid has an email address, and he also has political background and credibility to launch a serious campaign. Milton is a big town now. For a decade, it was the fastest growing community in Canada, and today it's home to 110,000 people. It's a community in its diversity and youth that reflects the 905 of the 21st century. The decisions that get made over the next decade in Milton could fundamentally shape the kind of community it becomes. A vibrant, mature, modern city, or a sprawling nowhere of strip malls and highways. It may be well over 20 years since Mayor Krantz has faced such a significant challenger. We think it's important that you get to hear from that challenger direct. Welcome, Z Hamid, to the 905 podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You announced a month and a half ago, that you were going to take on Canada's longest-serving mayor in Gord Krantz, and suggests that maybe Milton, it's time for a change after a period of time longer than my lifetime. I was just looking at your website this morning, but I mean, let's start off with just why you wanted to run, and actually what's your vision for Milton?
Yeah, Milton's in a unique position where I don't consider myself running against someone. In fact, I have great deal of respect for our mayor. I think he's done a great job. He has an amazing legacy, and he's brought Milton this far. But the real question is, who's the right person to lead Milton forward? So it's not against anyone. It's really to say, hey, it's 2022. Milton's one of the youngest communities in Canada. Median age in Milton is only 34, by the way. It's also the highest educated community in Canada. And so if you look at these factors, the question then is, what are the things we need to do going forward, and who's the right person to lead the community with these challenges? As far as platform is concerned, it's really pretty simple, honestly. Milton is growing like most places in GTAH, and we really do need to take a handle on our growth. We need to figure out how to grow and grow on our terms in a way that benefits the community and not in a way that hurts the community.
So I just want to touch upon that. We've heard that before, is that we need to grow on our terms. Something we've kind of advocated on this podcast is for local communities to have a say in how they want their communities to change. I want to press on you. What exactly do you see Milton needing to change over the next let's go say 10 years time? How do you think Milton needs to change compared to how it is right now?
Yeah, let's talk about easy stuff that's completely up to us. So one of the things that's going wrong in Milton is we're basically just houses and warehouses. We don't have a ton of activities. We're actually actively driving away jobs, unfortunately. So regional staff predicts that in a 10-year period, Milton will end up driving away 17,000 existing jobs. And that's mostly because as areas are intensifying, these old industrial areas, they're being replaced by condos and mixed use, which is actually not unsuitable. So don't get me wrong, which is actually exactly what should happen in those areas. But then we don't have alternates for these businesses to move to. And the reason we don't have alternate is not because we didn't plan it, but because as applications come in for warehouses, and these are massive mega warehouses, like they boggle the mind how big they are. They're big enough that they have trucks driving inside of these warehouses. Our council, majority of council, against our own official plan, has chosen to approve these warehouses. And they don't generate a lot of jobs. They're basically just storages. And they're fully automated. I used to work for Amazon, so I can understand how automated they really are. And they don't add much value to the community. And what ends up happening is that the reason, so to be fair to the other side, the reason they get approved is because they give you a tax assessment immediately, because they go up in 1 year and you get like, 1 million square foot built in 1 year, and hurrah. But in the long term, in the long run, they actually you actually generate smaller taxes from them because they don't use as much covered area than, say, a multi-story office building would do. Plus, it means that a small business owner in Milton, your auto body shop, your mechanic shop, your machinery, your gymnasium, and all these other small industrial uses, they have nowhere to go. And they're either being forced to retire or they're moving out of Milton. So that's the one quick thing that we can do to change. And one thing that people don't realize often is quality of life services are often not built based on residential tax base. They're built on the backs of business taxpayers because businesses pay a higher tax rate and they don't ask for much in return. And so if we're a community that actually it's not a business friendly community, and as a taxes shift from more business to residential, you'll see taxes go up, but you'll get nothing in return. So Milton will never have a decent transit system or a decent community services system or like proper parks or libraries or anything else that we desperately need.
And I guess, Milton, and I don't know Milton well. I obviously lived in Halton for a decade, but even actually longer than a decade, almost 20 years. But in that 20 years, it grew phenomenally from still a seeming relatively small place to one of the three big towns in Halton, I guess. And it seems to have made a lot of one of the better words, it's made the same mistakes as all the new towns in the 905 kind of done, which is just to be very car centric. Now you speak about on your website, you're saying, well, we can grow and we can have more trees, we can have better transit, all admirable things, but how do you go about kind of redesigning a town that was designed for cars? And can you actually, I know this is something that Burlington struggles with. It's like, we want people to walk more, we want people to be healthier, we want walkable streets, but things weren't designed that way. How are we going to get there?
Yeah, it's really hard to go back and retrofit. And so some of the things you have to accept if you want to build a transit-oriented community, that older parts of that community, you'll have to subsidize transit and alternate modes of transportation more than if you design it properly. And that's one of the challenges a lot of municipalities face. Milton faced that challenge as well, where we, in my previous term, the majority of council decided to take actually bus service away from older Milton because it wasn't hitting the right metrics. But it wasn't hitting the right metrics because it wasn't designed to be very transit friendly. So clearly fewer people will take transit because it's extremely sprawled. And that's just it doesn't mean that you kind of move the bus service. It just means that you kind of look at it differently. In terms of going forward, our plans are actually quite good. Milton is fortunate that we have good staff and they come up with these great master plans, 15-minute communities, walkable, bikeable, and everything else. The issue happens at implementation of that plan because it's very easy to put things off just a little bit. So it's very easy to say, you know what, that's great, but we're going to build this trail, next year, and we're going to put a transit here next year, even though people are moving in this year. And then next year never comes. And what we really need is a commitment and put transit and cycling, essentially multimodal transportation, at the same level as cars. And so when we're designing a community, we design it from scratch in a way that you don't need your car to get around. Because once people get used to cars and they buy their second or third family car, it's very hard to take them back. And so if you design it up front, and when you move into a brand new subdivision, there is a bus right there, the cycling trail is ready, that you have a clean, safe cycling path, the walking off-road trail, so you don't have to walk, through the cars, you can go off into backcountry trails to go to wherever you're going. They're all ready to go. They're accessible and usable. Then people will use it. But what happens in all municipalities, Burlington included and Milton included, is that we think of these things after the fact, and we want to make sure that we get all the people moved in first.
The counterpoint to that is that Milton is often viewed as kind of a bedroom community. It's a lot of similar to other Burlington and Oakville. The residents would get on a GO train, go into Toronto to work, come back, and live in Milton. So are you talking about kind of a cultural change in Milton to get away from that idea, that mindset of, well, I just need a place to park my cars, put my stuff in a house, but my day-to-day life is actually in Toronto, working in a Bay Street office, if you will. How do you view that dichotomy, I guess, or that conflict of interest?
Yeah, if you talk to most people who do this, they do this out of necessity, not out of choice. I commuted downtown Toronto for 7 years when I worked for Amazon, and I was a sitting councillor at that time as well. We do it because there was no alternative available. If I had an alternative, I would give up my 3 hours a day commute, absolutely, in a heartbeat. And so if you look at Kitchener-Waterloo, they used to say the same thing about Kitchener-Waterloo 20 years ago. And that area has kind of defied this expectation and really developed on its own right as a center for really technology companies and then other industries and stuff as well. Milton's in a very unique place because we're right next to Mississauga, and Mississauga is pretty packed up. And their companies are now had presence in Mississauga. They're moving out and they're bypassing Halton altogether, and then they're moving to KW and Guelph because Halton isn't as business friendly. And what we really need to do is rethink how we build communities. This old 1980s model of building, homes over here and then commuting everyone out to work somewhere else and commuting back to home, that doesn't work anymore. And that's not how people want to live, honestly.
That's a really interesting point you just made, because I've not heard anybody say that before, and I've certainly not heard an elected official say it before, that Halton is not business friendly. Traditionally, I'm going to guess Gary Carr might have something to say about that. But it's true. You're making a point that certainly immediately resonates with me, even though I haven't really thought about it before, is like, yeah, why are they going to Waterloo and Kitchener and not coming to Halton? And in terms of the kind of major companies finding somewhere to locate, is that a matter of sort of space, that Halton's out of, we don't have much green space. Milton's one of the few areas that does still have green space, and that's causing its own problems and debates at the moment. You were very complimentary about Gore Krantz at the start, but I mean, have there been mistakes made by our leadership in the various towns and cities over the last 20, 30 years that you think now need to be changed?
Yeah, so there are two questions there. Let's talk about business friendliness. Most communities are very business friendly when it comes to large corporations. So if Amazon wanted to build a warehouse in any community, they would go as quickly as they humanly could to approve that. The challenge is that if you wanted to start, a small studio for podcasting, for example, you would have a heck of a time going through it. And I'm talking about the opposite. What really should happen is that communities should support local independent businesses. These big corporations have money and they have lawyers and they have planners and they have everything else they can get through. Essentially, what ends up happening with these communities, with Milton, Halton, and other communities as well, is that we have the same process that requires, like 17 different approvals from 17 different agencies and like these stack of reports and all these studies. Manamis and Amazons and Orlando corporations of the world can get through it, but you and I cannot. And we need to rethink the approach because it's not working. And in terms of the second question, most of the councils, if you look at it, and it's hard for me to say that because I don't want to appear ageist, but there's a very specific demographic that runs these communities. And that demographic tends to not reflect the community as a whole. So if you look at most councils, and it has to do with how councillors are paid and how they're accommodated, most young professionals don't even think about this. It doesn't matter. They might have the desire, they might even have the skill, but they don't think about it because who's going to leave their job and take, being a councillor in Milton for $40,000 a year? And so you end up getting people who retired and they have a very different perspective because once you're done raising a family, your perspective actually changes a lot.
It sounds like you're like when you keep coming back to this idea of trying to change the culture of Milton, which is ambitious to say the least. I kind of want to go a little bit deeper into that because I think you're touching on something that I think we've also been touching upon during the course of this podcast is kind of the lack of vision, not just at town of Milton, but kind of in at our municipal leadership. At least we've seen in this election. In that, what I'm getting at is. Let's stay here in Milton. In Halton. Milton is the town of Milton. You have the town of Georgetown, the town of Oakville. I know it's the city of Burlington, but you ask a lot of Burlingtonians, they'll say, "Oh no, we're the city with the small town feel." And I'm wondering, does that identity serve these communities in the 21st century? Are we stuck in a mindset of the past that is going to leave us behind? As the challenges of the 21st century economy just start bearing down on us?
Yeah, we can double down on that, right? So what feeling do you get when it's town off something? The problem is that communities call themselves a village or a town or a small town, but they still design themselves to be very, very car-centric. And forget car-centric. The problem with land planning, the problem with development in Ontario suburbs is that they're exclusively designed around cars. So when applications come in, you look at, well, how many cars are going to be generated? How much parking space do we need? How are they going to move? So we need these many lanes, and we need yada, yada, yada. They're not people-centric. And the cultural shift we have to make is that we have to start designing cities for people. Now, people drive cars, therefore cars will be accommodated, but it really should be for people. How do we move people around? Now, how do we move cars around? How do we effectively move people around? So certain percentage of them will use cars, but you know what? Certain percentage of them are willing to not use cars anymore, but they really have no choice. So to give you an example, if I wanted to come meet you, you're in Hamilton using transit, I have no way of getting there. It doesn't matter how much time I was willing to spend. I cannot get to you with transit without driving to a transit station. And so we've done it wrong. We've completely done it wrong. And once I get in the car and drive to a transit station, why would I take a GO bus? I'll just continue driving on to Hamilton. I have two daughters that go to McMaster. It's a 25-minute bus ride to McMaster from the Go Park and Ride lot. but there's no bus going to the go park and ride lot. Like it's just we don't complete the story, and that's the problem with the way we think about transit in this country, in this province at least. As I give you the example, right? We look at certain metrics and we'll say, well, this bus service is doing really well. We'll keep this one, but this other one we won't keep because it's not doing that well. We don't realize that they depend on each other. Transit is just like a road network. If you don't finish the network, it doesn't work. You can't just do it half-ass way.
Well, you talk about half-ass way. I just want to. There's a thought that popped in my head is that often we hear about planning departments say, oh, you want to put in a condo tower or whatever have you, but the first floor needs to be for shop businesses, commercial use. And we always say that's great. We give a small business a chance to open up a shop or something. But what we just say there, but we also have to talk about how do we get cars downtown and all this, and you realize it doesn't work. Like you have cars driving along these newly designed streets, but they have it's hard to park. It's not friendly to make you stop and get out and just what's this shop here? I've never seen that before. I'm going to get out and wander in and shop and buy or do business or whatever have you. But we kind of have this like, oh, that's enough. We'll set up a first floor commercial retail space, but not really do anything to encourage people to get down there and stop and partake in whatever that business is doing, whether it's a restaurant or a shop or a financial planner or whatever have you. There's not a question here. It's just something that popped in my head.
I can add something to it actually. So we think of often when these condo proposals come up, we think of them in terms of single family subdivision terms, just vertical, and that's not correct. So you can think of a condo retail as a typical sprawl plaza. And that's how people often think of them. Like, well, someone needs to drive there and shop there. So but these condos on their own don't work. But if you create a network where you now have a street that's walkable, that have 5,000 people living there within a walking distance, like within 5-minute walk, then you no longer need to accommodate cars to drive in there and park somewhere because you have all the, everything you need is right there. And ironically, what ends up happening is that these car drivers and find a way to get there anyway, because it's a lively street. It's just more happening in there. And one of the things that really took me a while to understand, a lot of these downtown or lakeshore type places, like Oakville Lakeshore, when they start charging for parking, the usage actually goes up. And that's typically because they start charging for parking when they've created this like vibrant main street. And then they can start charging for parking, and only people who want to go shop there will take it seriously are the ones that come. We need to rethink how we develop communities, and there's a lot we can learn from older cities that have gone through this before, especially European cities and some of the more denser American cities as well. But we can't keep doing things the way we've done for the past 50 years. That doesn't work anymore.
Just want to turn the subject in a slightly different direction. I'm just going to throw one thing out there, which is not on the kind of Halton agenda yet, but which I wonder if it should be. And I know I had conversations with Marianne Mead Ward in 2018, and I know it's an idea she's keen on, but hasn't managed to get to the top of the agenda yet. And that's, should Halton just have a regional bus service rather than Milton having its buses and Oakville having its buses and Burlington, and them not even being kind of allowed to go to the other city or the other town? Would it not make more sense just to have a regional service that then we could get on a bus in Burlington and go to Milton, which I can't currently do?
We really should have metropolitan service across GTA, GTAH. Really, Metrolinx should run it. Toronto is very unique in terms of major global cities that we think of transit only in local terms. But in absence of that, we should do what York and Durham region does. And yeah, we should definitely have a regional bus service. The challenge is that Oakville historically and still is against it. In a regional government, and we'll get into technical regional governance, that it really isn't that valuable right now, but regional government isn't set up properly. It's set up in a way that larger municipalities can basically call the shots. So let's move away from Halton, because I don't want anyone to feel pointed. But if you look at Peel, for example, Caledon might as well not have a seat in regional council because Mississauga and Brampton dictate exactly what happens. So, and that's kind of what happens in Milton as well, in Halton as well. But I do believe that next term of council will be able to push through and start making progress in regional transit.
Okay. And now turning in the inevitable direction of development, I noticed on your website you say, let me just make sure I get the quote here. We can grow without building high rises in already established neighborhoods, and it's time for more houses and warehouses. And you made that point already, but when I see a phrase like "we can grow without building high rises," it's like, maybe, but will you have that power as a council? The height of buildings and tends to get decided not by councils these days. It's by the OLT. Are you not risking there kind of raising people's hopes that there will be a made in Milton solution to the major developments that happen?
Yeah, so I've always been ambitious. You'll continue to see that. I was very careful not to indicate that we will not intensify. We do need to intensify. So these old, very sprawl subdivisions, we do need to figure out how to intensify them. But I think we can do that while maintaining the character. And so I was very specific in calling out high rises specifically, and not give any hope that we will not intensify. We do need to intensify. Developers I've talked to, they're actually very willing to work with municipalities. One of the things we've done in Milton, and it was a series of my motions actually at the Halton region, where we're developing a high-rise neighborhood on Trafalgar. Developers have agreed to build a second GO station there, fully developer funded, and Metrolinx has signed off on it. And it's actually an amazing opportunity because for the first time that I can think of, we can design a very Mississauga city center type neighborhood on a greenfield. The event, and when we talk high density, we mean really high density. We're talking about 30,000 people plus 19,000 jobs in a very small geographic area. In the rest of areas, if you work with developers and find them alternates, because developers are in this business to make money. That's what they want to do. They want to make money with least amount of effort possible, like every other business. And if we work with them and say, look, you know what, you want to put 20 stories here, but guess what? If you can check it out to 10 stories, we can work with you to get you the other stories all over here where it's a little more suitable. Because what we really want to do is phase in heights. If you have a single family home, you should have a 40-story building next to you. You start with like maybe 6 stories and 8, and then it goes up to 20 and 40. So kind of phase in. And we're actually trying to do that along our current GO station, which again, it baffles me, but most of the GO stations in Halton region have sprawl subdivisions around them. So we are intensifying that area, and I supported intensification. I support every single high-rise project in that area, even though they are near an established neighborhood, but that is where it actually makes sense.
So high-rises are acceptable in the right areas. But I mean, do you think, I don't know what Milton's experience is with the OLT in recent years. I can only speak to, I have most familiarity with Burlington, where it's been, everything is extremely adversarial. It certainly seems in the last 4 years like the city's role in development has effectively been entirely sidestepped by the OLT, by developers going to the OLT, and that's now kind of the default situation because the timelines are so short. Because why wouldn't they? The councils are under different pressures to a tribunal that is completely kind of faceless and unanswerable to anybody. So, are you not just inevitably going to face the same problems where you can plan what you like, but it's going to be decided somewhere else?
Yeah, OLT shouldn't exist. But that said, and I'm not saying Burlington does that, but what a lot of councils do with OLT is that they also use OLT as a scapegoat. So rather than taking the leadership and saying, look, we do need this project in this area. This is downtown. We do need people living here. They kind of take the easy way out and they say, well, let's make it somebody else's problem. And they then fight developers, even for development that actually is good. So I'll give you an example. There's an entire area in Milton, or two examples that are both exactly identical. The two places in Milton where I can't campaign because I voted and I approved these high density high rises. Because they made sense in those areas. One is at a major intersection that's in a major transit node, and we need more people living there. The other one is walking distance from downtown Milton. Not in any established neighborhood. It's right next to a train track. But often what ends up happening is that people don't want to see a building. because they've never seen one. And the fact that they can see it is interpreted as you're destroying my views. But not really. I mean, that's not a good enough argument. So in both cases, actually in one case, I was the chair of the meeting where the vote was split, and I was the deciding vote because, as you know, in Ontario, the chair typically only votes as a tiebreaker. So the vote was split. I was a tiebreaker vote to say, yep, it should go for it, because we do need to intensify. And I want to be very clear. We need to intensify. We need to put right densities in right places. And when you get density in the right place, as leaders, you need to step up and own up to it and sell that to the community instead of just punting it over to OLT. That said, though, you're right about all the criticism of OLT, and I really do think it shouldn't exist. It's a very Ontario thing. In other provinces, other jurisdictions, developers have court as a venue where if we treat them unfairly, they can sue us in the court and get the approval. The OLT shouldn't exist.
Yes, well, I'm going to be completely biased there and say, yeah, you're right, and I agree with you there. But and I just want to point out, I really appreciate your frankness there. That it's like, yeah, I've done these things and they were unpopular in this part of town because people who live there, I mean, there's a constant challenge with politics, basically, because you're basically, it's a popularity contest at the end of the day. And so you don't want to say anything that's going to make you unpopular. But you have, inevitably every decision that you make, that a councillor makes or an elected official makes, is going to inconvenience somebody. I don't think there's ever. I remember when Joe Brant Hospital was expanding. It's like, well, there's a universally good thing. Who's going to oppose that? Well, again, it spoiled somebody's view, so there were complaints. It's like, well, what else? I mean, this is a really difficult one for you to answer, I guess. But we need to get away as politicians, not that I am, but as I was briefly, from kind of telling voters that they can have everything. Do we need to be kind of tougher and say, like, no, you can't have everything. There's going to be development. There's going to be intensification. You're just going to have to deal with it. And the question is not. The question we should be asking is, what's the best? What kind of development do you want? Not do we have it or not?
Yeah, you can have things you want. It's just that what we don't do is politicians tend to lie to people and tell them they can have things for free. You can't have them for free. So if you want services that a lot of residents want that are dictated by density, then you have to accept density. If you want to live in old sprawl style subdivisions, then you're going to have traffic and you're going to have high taxes. There's absolutely no way to mince words. There's no way around it. And that's the irony, right? If you intensify smartly, as densities go up intelligently, your traffic actually goes down because more and more people take transit, they bike, they walk. A lot of traffic problems we see is a result of sprawlness, not a result of density, but people mistake that. And often, and this happens time and time in Milton again, people think of a condo proposal as single family homes stacked on top of each other. And they come out and say, well, you're building 400 units there and there are 800 cars and they all go out at 9 a.m. And I've been a councillor for 12 years. And in past 12 years, I've had exactly 0 traffic issues because of condos. 100% of them happen because of single family homes that have 3 cars and wide streets, and everyone drives and they all go out and hit the same intersection at the same time. Condos don't cause those issues as long as they're placed in the right places. So I think we just need to be honest with people and help them think long term. I think most voters are smart. I say most, not all, but I think most voters are smart. And I do believe that they can understand the long-term vision if you just have the courage to sell it to them.
I want to change gears a little bit. I wanted to ask you, if you were to be elected mayor of Milton, how would you view your relationship with the province? And I'm asking this because since the last provincial election, and definitely leading up to that one, we got the sense that this government was looking to consolidate more power at the provincial level, more of the decisions that probably should have been made at a local level. They're saying, we're just going to make it for you. Things like the ministerial zoning orders, excuse me, the fact that they're giving a lot more power to the OLT, as we touched upon in these developments. as mayor, like how would you approach that relationship with the province?
It's a really tricky position because in Ontario, municipalities are a creation of the province. Like we don't really have any inherent political power in the constitution. It's whatever province decides to give us. So they do have the power to do just about anything they want. And but municipalities do have multiple venues. Mayors have a lot of lobbying power. So for better or worse, if you look at Oakville and what they were able to do with their gas station during McGuinty government, they didn't want it. Again, I don't think it was the right decision, but hey, it was their decision and they stopped it. And more recently, Glen Abbey proposal. Again, it was a conservative government and they got the government to step in and stop it. Mayors often underestimate that they have the biggest megaphone in the community, more than the MPP, more than the MP. And the mayors that are willing to use that megaphone can actually influence policy. And we do need to unite. And OLT, unfortunately, gets very technical. And one of the things province has done, both governments, Liberals and Conservatives, they keep changing the name of the tribunal. So it makes it very difficult to kind of raise awareness because it goes from OMB to LPAT to OLT. It's the exact same thing. Just the names keep changing. But we need to figure out how the mayors get together and really raise awareness and make it into an election issue, because we do have the power to do that.
Well, I like what you just said there, that mayors need to get together. And it seems, Rob Burton during his career as mayor, has been one of the mayors more willing to be outspoken about the province and I remember him being extremely outspoken about the Liberal government, even though he's generally seen as a kind of liberal leaning mayor. And I interviewed him and he was extremely outspoken about the provincial government too. And what I've seen certainly in Burlington's history, and I see it in Hamilton too, is that everybody tries to be the province's best friend because it's like, well, if we're not, we're going to get screwed, for want of a better word. It's like, is that really working? Maybe, here's a mayor who's willing to just really strongly say, this is wrong, and I'm going to kind of throw my community's power behind that. Versus the kind of trying to play nice and hope that the province is nice to you in return, which is often a faint hope. So do you think it's being more outspoken, basically, to cut my long question a lot shorter, is actually the way to go?
I think you're elected as a mayor to represent your community, and you need to do what's best for your community. And there are times where what's best for your community is being outspoken. And as I keep saying, mayors underestimate their lobbying power. Oakville is an example. And it's difficult to be the only outlier that's outspoken because you're taking a risk. And that's why places like, large urban municipal mayors forum, right, where all the large urban municipal mayors get together and they collectively take positions, or AMO or FCM. These are good venues to advocate where you can really come together and take a strong position. But you're absolutely correct. The thinking is that we always have to go along with whatever the province is doing, because otherwise we might not get the right funding, or fundings might get cut. That's the evidence doesn't indicate that fear is unfounded. If you look at the evidence over the past 20 years, you can play nice. It doesn't do anything for your community. There are times where you lobby in a nice way, and at times you become very outspoken. But you do have to be willing to be nonpartisan, though, because you have to be willing to go against your own party, whichever party you identify with, because once you're a mayor, you should think about your community, not the political party. And I find that, unfortunately, a number of mayors are very partisan, which helps them in their donations and volunteers, but I think it hurts their communities.
We're coming up on our time. I know just how busy you must be at the moment running a full campaign. I'm going to end it with a final kind of slightly cheeky question, I guess, and can you win? Gord Krantz just has, it's the Hazel McCallion kind of syndrome or phenomenon. Let's say phenomenon, not syndrome. It's an uphill battle for anybody, however qualified you might be, to take on someone with that kind of track record. how are you do you feel like you're an underdog, or do you feel like you're really got an excellent chance here?
No, I'm certainly an underdog, and it is a mountain to climb, but it's doable. And what we really do need, and I tend to have hopeless optimism sometimes, and I back it up with hard work and good planning. And Milton desperately needs a mayor that has that optimism backed by hard work and good planning, because if we don't change anything, then nothing will change, and we'll continue to be a community of houses and warehouses. If you think about it, Milton is in this enviable position where, for better or worse, right, we are really developing greenfield, meaning you can completely design from scratch the way you want it to be, and it will look exactly like that. It's very difficult to retrofit anything. And I'll give you an example. Simply getting Milton to adopt LED lights took 4 years. It took me 4 years of convincing, 2 terms of council. I started in the previous term and all the way to the next term. It shouldn't have taken 4 years, because guess what? The payback period was 3.5 years, meaning if we invest $1 million converting existing lights to LED, in 3.5 years, we'll get the entire $1 million back because of electricity saving, and then it's just gravy. Even something as simple takes forever. And that's mostly because politicians are adverse to change. They like to keep things the way they are because they're very risk averse. You really need a politician that's actually not risk averse, that will make a plan, that will tell you things that are hard to do, and just go after them. So I think it's time. I really do think it's time. What I'm hearing from the community, that it's time. And the comparison with Hazel McCallion, it gets made mostly because of age. But to be fair to Mayor McCallion, I mean, she's famously known for clicking away in her BlackBerry, and she still is extremely outspoken about things that matter to her, and about issues which she thinks they should be a certain way. To be fair to our mayor is not, right? He's not outspoken at all on anything, and that hurts Milton.
Zeeshan Hamid, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. As we would say to everybody running at whatever level in the elections this year, we wish you all the best with your campaign, and whatever the outcome is, we hope to speak to you again before too long. It's certainly been a great conversation today.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.